we are now focused on the statement of intention for individuals filing a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. This statement essentially discusses and lays out if you have property that has a lien on it, or if you have a lease or an unexpired contract, what do you intend on doing with that in your bankruptcy? For example, if you have a house with a lien on the house or a mortgage, do you intend to surrender the house? Do you intend to continue paying the mortgage and reaffirm that mortgage so that it goes past your bankruptcy? What do you plan to do with your items of property? That's essentially what the statement of intention is asking you to complete. And so I'm again back on Ashley's page, and we have gone to statement of intention, and I'll scroll down and generate a new file. Okay, and so we're here looking at official form 108, which is the statement of intention. Let's look at how Ashley filled out the form. She adds her name and where she filed, like always. And let's move down to the meat of the form. The statement of intention says if you're an individual filing under Chapter 7, you must fill out this form if you have creditors, if creditors have claims secured by your property. And recall that in Ashley's case, she does have one secured claim, which is her car. She has a Volvo that has a car note, and that creditor is secured by that car. And so she would need to include that piece of property in this statement. The other option, as you'll see, is if you have leased personal property and the lease has not yet expired. That would again include something like a vehicle lease where you're leasing a car, and this form is asking, do you want to keep the car, or are you going to give up the car that's subject to the lease? And so let's move on to part 1 and see how Ashley filled it out. Part 1, list your creditors who have secured claims. For any creditors that you listed in part 1 of Schedule D, fill in the information below. As you'll recall, Ashley's Schedule D included one creditor who had a secured claim in her property. That was Western Funding, Inc., and Western Funding had a lien on her 2013 Volvo. And so let's see how Ashley filled out part 1. For part 1, she listed that creditor, Western Funding, Inc., and she also included a description of her vehicle that was subject to the lien. And like the other parts of her schedules, she labeled this item of property as 2013 Volvo SST, and she included the number of miles on the vehicle at the time she filed the bankruptcy. So the next question asks, what do you intend to do with the property that secures a debt? And it gives you a couple of options. The first option is to surrender the property. Now, you might want to surrender the property if, for example, you have a car that's worth way less than what you still have to pay to keep the car. For example, your car is worth $3,000 and you still have $10,000 left on your car note. It might be a good idea in that situation to go ahead and surrender the car and get that debt discharged and go and buy another vehicle after your bankruptcy. A lot of people, though, don't have the option to do that. They've got to still get to work, and they don't have time necessarily to go find another car or the finances to go purchase another car. And so in some cases, you might fall under these second options. The second option is to retain the property and to redeem it. We're not going to get into that. It's a little more complex than this video, but if you believe that option might apply to you, please make sure you do your research and your due diligence. The third option, which is what Ashley selected, is retain the property and enter into a reaffirmation agreement. In this scenario, you'd keep your car, as Ashley did, and plan to enter into an agreement with your lender that says, I'm going to keep the car, and most likely I'm going to keep paying at the same monthly payments that I'm already paying. That's what a typical reaffirmation agreement looks like. Now, if you're trying to make a reaffirmation agreement with one of your creditors, it may be a good idea to consult with an attorney or to hire an attorney to negotiate a reaffirmation agreement. In a lot of situations, your lender might not be willing to negotiate different terms. They might say, I'll agree to, the same terms that we already had on our note, on our car note, but I'm not going to give you any better terms than you had. And so that's what I've seen in a lot of cases is that, people just keep their same agreement, and, the creditor will agree that that the debtor just continues paying the same amount. The fourth option, retain the property and explain. If there's some other agreement or circumstances that would allow you to retain the property, then you provide a brief description here. That obviously didn't apply in Ashley's case, and so I'm not going to discuss that. In this example, in this part of the form, did you claim the property as exempt on Schedule C? Ashley actually put yes, but I believe she meant to select no because she did not claim this property as exempt on Schedule C. I think the reason she did not claim the property as exempt was because there was no equity in the property. The value of the car, according to her valuation, was less than the amount still owed on the vehicle. So there's nothing for her to claim as exempt in that scenario. And so, that's all Ashley has filled out for Part 1. That's the only item of property that has a lien on it. And so we can move down to Part 2. Part 2 asks that you list your unexpired personal property leases. Recall that Schedule G lists out our contracts and leases that we're a party to. And so as you may recall with Ashley, she was not actually a party to any leases or contracts. And so Part 2 for her is going to be left blank. Again, if you do have unexpired leases that were listed in your Schedule G, you would include those here and provide a selection about whether you're going to assume that lease or not. And so that's Part 2. Ashley did not fill anything out in Part 2 because, like we discussed, she did not put anything on her Schedule G. And Part 3 just asks that you sign under penalty of perjury that you've indicated your intention about your property that's secured, and you've indicated your intention about personal property subject to a lease. And so, in this part, Ashley went ahead and provided her electronic signature and the date that she filed the bankruptcy petition. So, with that, we can save as, and I'll save it as statement of intention and replace the old copy. And once I've done that, I can go back to the Better website and select statement of intention and upload it. And once this is uploaded, we can go ahead and select completed, and we're done with the statement of intention. So we'll see you back here for the final statement.